We may have a good chunk of 2023 to cover yet, but thus far we've seen an embarrassment of riches in the indie game scene, and it may be fair to say a challenging puzzle title with an obtuse name like Chants of Sennaar, and release a day prior to a certain highly anticipated space RPG might not be likely to turn many heads. And yet, Chants of Sennaar is the most brilliant puzzle game of 2023, and the most fascinating and immersive such experience I've probably seen since Return of the Obra Dinn, a game I'll be likely to bring up again before this review is over. There may be a hell of a lot to play right now, but allow me to convince you that Chants of Sennaar's immersive enigma is easily worth your time and money. But first, let me take a moment to also convince you that it's worth checking us out on Patreon via the link in the description if you'd like to keep supporting independent, clickbait-free coverage of the best that indie gaming has to offer. Now, to get into it. Chants of Sennaar starts not just with limited exposition, but arguably none. You're playing it almost as soon as you hit new game, awakening as a nameless hooded figure implicitly tasked with exploring the sprawling halls of an ancient tower, speaking with the residents, and solving puzzles to make your way further and further up. There's certainly a plot to the game, but while it goes to some interesting places I personally enjoyed, its metaphorical nature and obscure delivery won't be a match for everyone, especially if looking for a more narrative-driven experience. But if you like puzzle games and seek something more immersive, look absolutely no further, because the main conceit is this. Tutorial menus aside, every word spoken or written in Chants of Sennaar is done so in one of 5 fictional languages spoken by the ancient races occupying the tower. Each of the 5 races is blocked off from the others for one reason or another, and live in large, sometimes labyrinthine spaces that don't just encourage but require thorough exploration. Because for reasons unknown until the very end, it's up to you to translate each language, learn what the people want, and restore their connections to one another. That's the rapid-fire elevator pitch, and it probably told you little to nothing of how the game is actually played. So, to bring it home, allow me to spoil only the first 2 minutes of the game, and feel free to skip ahead a minute if that's something you'd rather not hear. Here we go. The first interactable object you see in Chants of Sennaar is a door controlled by a simple lever. The bottom position in which the door is closed has 2 indecipherable words written next to it. The top position in which the door is open has another 2 indecipherable words, but only the first one of each is different. In this case, the game will task you as the player to open your journal, where these words automatically populate, and type in a guess as to what each word means. In this case, without breaking a sweat, you can probably figure out the words open, close, and door, which you'll use in the following room to determine which exact positioning of levers will allow you to cross to the next section. Whenever a new handful of words is heard or written, your hooded protagonist scribbles down a few careful illustrations in your journal and gives you a chance to guess what the words mean and lock them in for confirmation. This is generally done in groups of 3 or 4, and if you played Return of the Obra Dinn, you already know the satisfaction of solving such a huge, overarching puzzle bit by bit. Thorough exploration of each area is crucial, and you'll surely be returning to each landmark and conversation several times, often referencing your journal to see what's left to translate and where you might find context relevant to figuring it out. But while backtracking is usually a tedious slog in many games that require it, here you seemingly learn something new every time. Words you encounter will be written in the ancient language you're trying to translate, but your journal will automatically translate it in real time with whatever you've managed to lock in and guess so far. So if you've locked in 3 words of a 4-word sentence, and still need that 4th, it may read like a Google Translate search gone mad with conversations like "me travel thank kingdom," "warrior warrior lock door," sounding completely absurd until you decode each language's syntax and grammatical nuances to figure out what's being said. And the next time you go to that person, their speech may be completely intelligible, indicating you've learned enough of their language to decode the sentence in full. If this sounds boring to you, I'm not sure playing the game is going to change your mind, but if this sounds like an incredibly interesting puzzle-focused approximation of what it's like to learn a language in real life, you're going to want to pick up Chants of Sennaar immediately. I should emphasize though that it's not just the words you're trying to figure out here. Each language looks completely different and has separate rules on sentence structure, punctuation, pluralization, and so on. It can be overwhelming at first to enter a new area and have half your dictionary filled with new terms you couldn't possibly know the meaning of, knowing you just have to figure it out. Translation isn't the entire game, but it's certainly the core of it. The more you learn of each language, the more you'll also learn about each race's culture, their likes and their fears, as well as what problems they face as a society. Only with that knowledge can you actually move on to the next level of the tower, and the way this is accomplished is brilliantly natural. My particular favorite was a level habituated by a race of highly intelligent scientists that required you to melt down a specific combination of metals into a key you need to progress. But you couldn't do so without learning their unique number system that would, in turn, give you the knowledge to operate their machinery. Yes, I'm a math nerd, so maybe it's not surprising that the number geeks were the ones I identified with the most, but of the 5 races, there isn't a dud in the bunch, with each being a creative pivot I did not see coming as I made my way up the tower. It helps that the game is beautifully presented too. Chants of Sennaar's cartoony, saturated colors and unique environmental and character designs keep it constantly interesting to look at, making each sprawling, semi-open environment fun to explore and mixing things up substantially with the introduction of each new race. The music is also consistently great throughout, sometimes really surprising me with just how complex and moving some of the melodies were. Steam Deck support is also excellent, with the game running at a fast and flawless 60 FPS with no drops in sight. That said, it has some downfalls that won't make it a great fit for everybody. The somewhat large levels combined with the lack of a map can mean a lot of aimless exploration if you miss something, though more often than not, I'd eventually stumble upon what I'd missed and kick myself for not seeing it sooner. But every once in a while, an item location or key to progression was just obtuse enough to frustrate me. There is a hint system that allows you to highlight everything on screen that still needs interacting with to progress, but while it was helpful to eliminate the need to revisit rooms I've cleared over and over, it won't do much if you're totally stuck on which word means preacher and which word means God if you haven't managed to figure it out yet. The game doesn't hold your hand, and consequently solving its mysteries yields a level of satisfaction that is pure digital sex. But in the same breath, I won't pretend the aimless wandering was my favorite, and I occasionally resorted to a bit of guesswork to keep the pace moving. Probably not something to put on my resume if I ever want to switch careers to professional translator. As I alluded to before, Chants of Sennaar does mix up the puzzle solving a bit, and will often have you doing some traditional block pushing, hidden object puzzles, or figuring out how various devices work to use them to your advantage. Generally, these elements are greatly successful at mixing up the proceedings and often being a bit easier than the overarching translations, but the stealth sections would occasionally get a bit grating. They don't come up too often, and there tends to be a pretty linear path through them, but I won't pretend crouching behind walls moving from one pre-positioned silhouette of yourself to another is an especially compelling thing to do. I only had to repeat a few of these sections a couple of times, so they weren't a big deal, but in a game whose mechanics are usually firing on all cylinders, the stealth stands out as being a bit bland. If there's anything else to complain about, it's that once you've correctly guessed all the words in a given language, there's no way to sort them in a particular way. The result, especially in some puzzles where you have to translate from one ancient language to another, is slowly scrolling over each word trying to find a particular one but not remembering the symbol for it, making each sentence take a lot longer to build out than if you could simply alphabetize them or something to that effect. It was never a huge deal, but just a quality of life thing I'd like to see them add. Overall though, Chants of Sennaar is a triumph. It took me about 12 hours to reach the end credits for the first time, which came with an acknowledgement that getting the good ending would require a lot more effort on my part. But naturally, with a puzzle game like this, the time you play is going to dramatically vary based on how quickly you pick up what it's putting down. But looking back at my playthrough and thinking of the variety of puzzles it contained, the fascinating ways it would help me decode each language and the unique linguistic ideas at play, Chants of Sennaar is not merely a Golden Genie winner, but certainly one of the best games of 2023. Please do yourself a favor and do not miss this one.